I'm a theatre maker. I live in Glasgow. I make work in Glasgow. And tonight I'm having a conversation with Susanna Hislop and Sara Zaltash, who are also theatre makers with work on here in Edinburgh during the festival. And we're here tonight to talk about why theatre matters. I think that's our brief. Actually, none of us know each other is the first thing to say. That this is us meeting each other for the first time in front of cameras. And I thought it might be an interesting way to start to maybe just talk a little bit about the work that you have on in Edinburgh just now. Sara, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sign of how much we really just met each other. My name is Sara Zaltash.
Oh, so I'm so...
Zoltan I get. Zoltan happens.
Yeah.
I live in Bristol, and I am a member of a collective called Residence. I'm a performance artist, a live artist, and in Edinburgh this year, I am also performing in a theatre production with the Cambridge-based company 30 Bird. It's a three-hander, three women telling the story of an Iranian man who is married to an English woman who is a stay-at-home dad. It's called Domestic Labour, and it's about a love story that occurs through the work that happens in the house.
And have you made that piece of work? Are you the author of that work as well?
We've co-devised it.
Oh, right.
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
great.
So it was actually developed last year with the Bush Theatre up to 30 minutes in length. And we've developed it up to an hour long now. But it's very much our director's story. And
it is live work. Is there
Yes.
any element of it? Because I know that we're here as guests of Hibrow, and Hibrow are streaming work. And is there any element of your work in this show that involves digital technology or streaming or...
Not so much streaming, but our director, he actually moved from Iran to London to study at film school in London. So there is a film in the work, which I won't tell people because I don't want to give it away, but there is a film that really is like a cornerstone of the story that's being told, and that is on stage, just on a digital TV screen. That's, I think, as far as he wants to push that digital element in order to just maintain the integrity of the narrative and not tend towards any kind of trend. It's definitely a conversation that we've had.
But it's an
absolutely.
integral part.
Absolutely.
Like if you take the film out of it, the show's not there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I find that really interesting. I sort of find people who use digital technology in theatre in the background, I just sort of think, it's just like scenery. If you take it away, the show's still there. Susanna, do you want to tell us a bit about the show you have on?
So mine is a show called How Does a Snake Shed Its Skin? And it's a one-woman show in theory. As the performer, I'm the one woman performing. It's all made up of the real texts of various women. Marilyn Monroe, Virginia Woolf, Margaret Thatcher, but also my own texts from 11 till today. So it's a devised piece from bits of found words, if that makes sense. It doesn't feature any digital technologies.
Well,
because I feel very, very strongly, similar to you, that there's the kind of a fashion or a sort of idea of adding a bit in. And for me, I'm really interested in theatre, what theatre is, separate from what other things are.
And do you ever work with in a sort of crossover environment that does draw on other art forms?
Definitely. All the work I've done has always been really different. Each of the shows that I've made and myself have been very different. My other show was a 9-person ensemble, international, very physical theatre show, and was much more visual and performative. This one is much more, sort of draws a lot on comedy and stand-up, and is kind of interested in that relationship.
And how do you feel about streaming? It seems to be like a big thing now, especially at the sort of more commercial end of the theatre market. I think with the National Theatre Live. Do you go and see National Theatre Live when it's broadcast in cinemas?
I haven't, have you?
No,
but whether it's broadcast in a cinema or if it was broadcast, I would be far more likely to see it online than to go to the cinema to see it. And I actually, I think that the streaming of live performance, it will take the artists in the industry and the people around the industry of theatre to own that move as a move with live, with the live performance. I think that the fear is that somehow by going on screen, it becomes like mediated to the point that you lose the qualities of liveness that make theatre so appealing. But actually, it's about changing that attitude and saying, no, this is a live format that exists in our world, and we have to move into it.
I feel a bit split, because on one hand, I think it's great that is extending the audience of shows, but in another way, I find it's slightly conflicting, because if it's a theatre show, it's a theatre show. So if you're seeing it on the cinema, are you seeing a different, how is that working? And I haven't seen any, so I couldn't judge. But if the show was made with the aim of doing that, okay, that's one thing. But if you're just seeing a kind of a version that's filmed, and you feel a bit like, are you in the cheap seats? I think that's really interesting, actually, the idea. And I think that I sort of feel like at some point theatre has got to embrace this and actually, as you say, take ownership of it. It's like, if it's going to be broadcast, then at what point do we as theatre makers dictate how it's going to be filmed, where it's going to be broadcast to, how much does it cost? I mean, all that sort of stuff. It seems to me like it's a sort of parasite thing that goes in and sucks something out and then uses it for its own ends.
I don't know about you, Susanna, but when I hear about it, and I think that possibly theatre makers do believe this, is like it sort of makes me think of, like, when you're younger, and I think they might still do this, and they broadcast a celebrity panto at Christmas time, and it's a stage production. But it's like, but it's a stage production, but it's done for camera. Or when you're young and you're studying, I don't know, English or drama or something at school, and they show you the old BBC play, afternoon plays, and it's like, The Rivals by Sheridan or something, but they've made it for TV. And I think that's the fear, isn't it? That's the reason we all go, no, we actually create something amazing in our live space, and we don't want you to turn it into this weird TV thing, thanks. But it doesn't have to be like that.
Isn't it? Because it's also about, film is the most wonderful, wonderful, wonderful language, but it's such a different language to theatre. And
I think there's a liveness about digital that is yet to be explored. Like when you talk about how to reinvent this. I think it's the way ahead, and I think there's a whole using
world
digital to explore the liveness of a thing that already exists is one thing, but actually using like the live performance to explore the liveness of digital. I know there's a piece in Edinburgh at the moment which has been called kind of like virtual reality without headsets, and then it's for one person, and they go in, and it's a narrative experience. They're blindfolded. It's a narrative experience as if it's virtual reality, but without anything apart from other humans in the space. It's called Room, I think, on at the Pleasance. And like that sort of move, I'm more interested in anyway. Like, I'm more interested in like, how do we use these things that we're trained in, these skills that we have, to enter this new world of digital, rather than just holding on to our old world and trying to apply this new stuff to it.
It's not makeup. It's not something that is applied afterwards.
Exactly.
It's something
it's not cosmetic. It's integral.
I sort of feel that maybe the conversations we should be having with the people who are going to film our work should be happening on our first day of rehearsal, and not on the day of our dress rehearsal, when the film team come in and go, I've sort of roughly got an idea of where people are moving to. It's actually that have that conversation as early as possible.
I might put that in my next Arts Council application.
So if I were to ask you, for instance, like if National Theatre Live phoned you up tomorrow and said, right, we're coming to Edinburgh.
I'd say no, I'm full. I've got no audiences.
Here's the whatever. Here's the £10,000. We really want to come. We're going to spend a couple of days with you. We're going to broadcast it to cinemas throughout the UK. Then what's the thing that's going to make you say yes or no?
Well, do you know what? I laugh, but the thing that's going to make me say yes or no, if I'm being really honest, is a financial thing. Like, I'm doing my show to not very many people often in the Fringe, and hemorrhaging money, except for some sort of public funding from various things. And actually, that sounds like a facetious answer, but that's really ties into the truth of the situation, because it's commercial.
I think that's why the National Theatre are doing it.
Well,
I think it's certainly why the Metropolitan Opera in New York are doing it, who spearheaded the whole idea of live streaming.
It's kind of an expression, I think, of something that's problematic at the moment in our arts sort of industry, of the relationship between theatre and film. And because
so what if it wasn't £10,000? What if it was like £1,000? Is there a sort of negotiation you would do in terms of, yes, I'll do it if I have some control over the way you do it?
If I was having full integrity, I would want to sort of know, I would want to be able to be in the edit, because that's where things get made, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know, that's the creative process of film, is the edit.
But then if you're live on stage and they're doing a live edit, then...
Yeah, then, okay, well then I could be interested if there was an artist who was doing a live edit and people I respected as creative people making a response live to the show. I'd be really interested in that.
So it's consultancy, it's to do with the conversation actually that involves you as an equal voice, as the director and the editor, and
See, it's funny because coming from a live art background, it's a very different proposal. A friend of mine in Leeds runs a live art sort of online TV program that's a bit like Jules Holland for live art. So he has like cabaret tables. It's great. It's called Jam's Palace. It's called Jam's Palace. It's available online. And he gets live artists from around the world and also in the studio. And they broadcast live for 2 hours. And I recently did a slot on there, but from Berlin. So they Skyped my performance in from Berlin. And the piece that I usually do on a stage. It's like a piece that uses the UV light and lots of singing. But because it was digital, because I was freed from that, all the expense of the stage, I performed it in a bathtub for like, not just the live online audience, but for this studio audience. And I had no idea how they were going to react. I had no idea who was going to be there.
And were you aware? Could you hear the reaction from the studio over your Skype?
No. I turn them down because I've got to like sing and stuff in the bath, so I just wanted to focus. And actually that proposal was like, Sarah, do you want to do something for Jam's Palace? And I was like, how can I adapt this? And because there's no fee, what can I do that reduces all of that gumph and turn this and like really use that what comes with that digital is, which is like a massive reduction of expenses.
Yeah, which is wonderful. So that's the thing, isn't it? It's about, there's nothing more incredible than new languages and playing with those new languages. It's when there's the mismatch or the sort of wrong, you know, the commercial employment of a language, you know.
And also it seems to me that actually a lot of it is celebrity obsessed actually. I mean, would they have broadcast Coriolanus from the Donmar warehouse if it hadn't been Tom
Hiddleston.
You know, who was there. It seems to me that a lot of the sort of big commercial live streaming is really celebrity focused. It's to do with the fact that Helen Mirren's in it. It's to do with the fact that Benedict Cumberbatch is in it. And actually, if it was about the integrity of the work, you sort of wonder how many people would be going to cinemas throughout the UK.
Well, but if you're talking about celebrity power, then the very fact that it's Coriolanus is the first point that you need to start at. Like, you're talking about a very old text which has its own pulling power because it's famous. And so if it's then got famous people in it, that means you can afford to bring in a team to then broadcast it. That's just layering up that system, isn't it?
It's about, for me though, it's about audience, because it's a cliche, but one of the things about live performance is you have the audience. We were talking about this just before we started filming, and that weird alchemy between you and the audience, and not having that back is interesting, but I don't think that needs to be a negative thing. I think that's a really interesting thing, as long as there's something weird about performing in a space where you're asking for that alchemy plus being filmed. I remember doing a comedy, I was in a comedy sketch group for a long time. We did lots of live shows, then we did a couple of radio series. And the first radio series we recorded to a live audience. And it was like absolutely dreadful, because we heard it back and we were playing in the sort of BBC Radio 4 way to a live audience, and so we're playing out very loud, and getting lots of loud laughs, and it was a really great night, and then you listen back and it's absolutely terrible.
And actually I feel that I actually have been to see some of these live broadcasts, and it's very, very strange seeing actors on a screen project to, like for me it's a really, really strange sound. And it seems to me that that's one of the things that people need to think about, is Benedict Cumberbatch going to be acting this to camera, or is he going to be acting it to 1,200 people at the Barbican? And it seems to me that there's a real sort of schism between those two things. I'm not sure how you reconcile it.
I don't know, I think with repetition that strangeness could become marvellous. Like when people first started seeing moving pictures, it was very strange, and that it became marvellous.
And actually somebody told me that when they first started showing movies that it was so strange for audiences that actually they started off by showing it in the middle of live performances. You know, that they'd have like a warm-up act, then they'd show 10 minutes of film, and then they'd have another live act, and it was just to make it easier for the audience to take in this new medium.
Sounds like some of the shows I've seen here.
Yeah. No.
Not here specifically.
Exactly. The other thing that I sort of wonder as well to do with the filming of live performance, I mean, you guys are much, much younger than I am, but the idea of legacy, I mean, I think that's another issue for people who make work in a live environment. You know, when Stanley Kubrick dies, you know, they are, you know, we can all participate in that. But when we die, what do we leave behind in terms of, I mean, if it's not too grandiose, you know, what's your legacy as an artist? And I wonder, like, there's another function of filming theatre, which is an archiving of it, and whether that's something that you actively engage in, or I know there are a lot of people like Tim Crouch is like, no, this is a live event. He doesn't film anything he does. He deliberately like rejects the.
I was very excited because in one of my previews for the show at the BAC, I've basically achieved my life ambitions because it was filmed by the British Library, which is the place I'm most obsessed with in the world.
Wow.
But it was just totally for archiving purposes. And I think you may be able to go in and look up the file, but it's not for performance. So
but it is different. Archive and documentation is different from a public presentation. Like I think the thing that really
necessarily. I mean, necessarily. I mean, as
not necessarily. Like because a presentation, like a film presentation, can exist as a document and as an archive piece. But like I think it is about intention. I know that within performance art and live art, the thing that really tipped the debate about 5-6 years ago, whether or not we should document live art was about legacy. I think that was the factor that made people go, okay, we know that this is live and we know that liveness is the most important thing, but if we don't document this, then kids are going to be just doing the same thing over and over again and not knowing what's come before. And because it's such a progressive medium.
Learning as well, it's to do with like
about
awareness and building on what's come before.
Yeah, but conversely, there's going to be a real strength in then performance that is not documented and is live. It's kind of, I feel slightly convinced that if we were all to just go off, if I was to go off, go offline, go off all the sort of systems, those people who do that will be very powerful in 10 years' time.
And actually, Tino Segal, I think, is a very good example of that, who is a visual artist who works in live performance. And apparently he puts a lot of attention to not having his work documented. That if it appears on YouTube, he'll actively, ask for it to be removed. And actually, there's something really, really magical seeing his work and knowing that actually it is this moment and no other way to engage with it than to actually be in the room with it.
I know a dancer and choreographer who's participated in one of Tino Segal's works, the thing that was in the Tate recently.
Oh, right, yeah.
And this guy, his like final year thing at Dartington, for a year used absolutely no technology. Digital communications technology, so no phone, no internet, no like ATMs, no ticket machines, nothing. And he did it for a year, and everyone thought he was crazy. And now it's been almost 4 years that he's done this. And his name is Sebastian Beckinger English, and he insists that if he carries on doing this, he will be famous before
Yeah.
any of us will be famous. And actually what's happened is I've gone around the world kind of like with motivation. I mean, he's not very productive as an artist. He just doesn't use technology. Really. And he
kind of Andy Warhol for the 21st century.
Honestly, if you go around the place and you speak to people and you say, oh, I know someone from Dartington, I know Sebastian Becking English, they go, I know that guy, that's the no technology guy, right? And it's like,
but do people write about him? I mean, are there other ways?
I don't know if we're there yet, but it's only been 4 years, give him a couple of years time.
No,
but I think that people are, well, I made a work about him in Berlin earlier on this year, and
was he happy about that?
I don't think he knew about it.
He's not on the internet.
Exactly. It was a piece called My Name is Sara Zaltash and I'm looking for Sebastian Becking English, and we just arranged to meet up in Berlin in May. And so I was just looking for him everywhere.
Oh. With a camera or live?
Just with like little posters actually of the tours, and I have a story about him, how I know him. Yeah, through various ways, like tweeting and Facebook and pictures and all that kind of stuff. But I was looking for him because he doesn't have internet, he doesn't have a phone, he doesn't have anything, so I had to do it the old-fashioned way. And didn't find him, but found that his traces are everywhere because it's so powerful, this act that he's insisted on carrying through.
I saw a documentary on the BBC about the Turner Prize exhibition in Londonderry, Londonderry, and Tino Segal was part of that, and so they did their like 15-minute slot on one artist, 15-minute slot on the next artist, then the third artist, and then they were like, and there's this guy called Tino Segal who's in this gallery here, but we can't take cameras in there. So his slot was like 3 minutes long, and I sort of think maybe that's why Tino Segal didn't win the Turner Prize, because actually he really, that sort of marketing thing that we all participate in terms of, distribution and dissemination, that he's really like shutting the door to that. He's going, no.
Is he still okay with like paper, like posters and flyers and stuff like that?
Apparently the contract that he has with the galleries is a verbal contract that he will go in person and speak to the person who's buying the work and say, these are the terms that you're buying the work. Do you accept that? And they accept it. And then there's the money transfer.
That's interesting because we're talking about a transaction between the audience as well and setting up the terms of a transaction. I find that quite wonderful because it's really clearly establishing the terms. And I feel one of the problems I find it in Edinburgh like massively a problem, but in all performance is what's the transaction between us, and I don't mean that in a commercial way, I just mean that in a very literal way, what's being exchanged, and I think there's a lot of confusion about that.
And do you feel confused about it, or do you have clarity in that relationship with your audience?
I feel, I don't think I do feel confused about it. I feel people have come and given their time and often their money, and therefore I have a duty to try and impart, to try and reward that or honour that or kind of respect that. It is such a fine alchemy that you want that to be very carefully managed, and I think that's so important. And stand-up comedians is one of the things I'm really interested in. They know that so well. They know how to shift the balance of their audience each night, and that's where that art form comes from, is managing that. And I think often, especially in the sort of tradition of fourth wall theatre, that just got like thrown out of the window, and we're in a sort of funny realm of like what is talking to the audience, what isn't talking to the audience.
And do you feel like you manipulate your audience? I mean, if you're not getting something, are there tactics you use to try and like get
I'm trying to develop some tactics. No, more I just feel it's really important to actually, I really look at them and really try and communicate with them, and I go into the audience a bit, and not so much, just sort of try and, like any normal human relationship, no more than you do when you're having a conversation. I mean, we're all having a conversation, we're all manipulating each other in unconscious ways.
It's interesting because I think that as performers, variously, we all have training as performers, and you get quite a lot of training, and it's a training that is given to you from some kind of methodology of something that you're supposed to learn. Audiences kind of just learn on the cuff, and if they're used to being quite carefully placed and positioned and looked after, and this is the amount of time that you have and sit down, And then they come into a situation like this where it's like thrown in, sit down, the stool's sat in a slightly wonky angle, you haven't got enough space to stretch your legs, then it's like they don't have a training to fall back on that says, how do I make sure I'm a great audience member here?
I heard somebody say that recently, actually, that audiences are all autodidacts. And it's true, actually. What is your training as an audience?
And one of the problems, though, is that in a way, lots of audiences, especially theatre audiences, are unfortunately not. They're just basically other performers, reviewers, a small elite of people who go to the theatre.
And do you find that in Edinburgh particularly?
I think Edinburgh's a bit half and half in that you get that, and then you get full-on, total, tourists from all around the world, punters. In general,
and do you find it's a very different audience from like an audience you'd get in London or
anywhere else? Really different audience.
Yeah, and does that make you do a different type of work to bring here?
No, because I think you can't make work to bring to Edinburgh.
Right,
that would be a disastrous idea if you tried to model your work for Edinburgh specifically. I've made shows lots of times and come to Edinburgh, and I just think it's a complicated audience. It doesn't feel like a neutral. It doesn't feel a neutral audience. And in an ideal world, I'd love to make work for a neutral, random audience. I'm never going to plan to go to Edinburgh. If I have a show that's up and running and I feel it's like
that's at a right
it's
stage
ready to go into this brutal place, I'll take it there.
Do you think theatre's dying out? I mean, do you think that live performance is something that we're at the tail end of as theatre makers?
No. Well, I think it needs I feel like it needs a massive radical overhaul.
What, in its infrastructure, in its artists,
it's about the relationship between audience and theatre in a more wide-scale way.
Give us some examples.
Well, like today I was having dinner with my uncle and aunt, who my husband's uncle and aunt, who live in Edinburgh, and they were just starting to see some like bits of they saw a show which had some puppetry in it or some performance-y, more sort of visual elements, and they were kind of amazed and thought, this is what, I'd like to see more of that. And for them, theatre is still very much quite traditional. And I think for most people, they say, oh, I really should go to the theatre, but I'd rather go to the cinema. And it's just mad. And I feel there's a real disconnect between this amazing world of work and live performance and theatre going on, and then audiences, and it's just not meeting, and that something needs to change to make that shift.
I think coming from that school of from that work, that idea that there's all of this possibility, and it's not just about what goes on those stages. That kind of that form that developed along with the Industrial Revolution, that is a theatre, that is a house that you pack out and you show a thing that is almost mechanical.
Everybody's pointing in the same direction.
Well, that's the cinema. It's dying, and if it exists, it exists as a museum piece.
Well, it's the cinema.
Well, exactly, and
like
it's
the
cheaper.
cinema is that now.
But then there obviously is a huge audience for that. There is Warhorse, like storming the world.
And that doesn't mean the thing is, it doesn't mean it's bad. Does, but it's like, it depends what you want as an audience and what you want as an artist. I think there's a propulsion in artists to try to do new things. We're always not just for novelty, but that's especially in the sort of from the 20th century. If you're not an avant-gardist, then you what are you? Then
I was thinking of something the other day. Your sense of smell. It is like neurologically, it's just sensing change in smell.
Really?
And actually, because if there's a smell and you're in that smell for a long period of time, you don't smell
like
it.
People with dogs.
All you smell is a change of smell. And I think it's actually really interesting to think of that in art as well. I sort of feel that if I go to the theatre and it's the same thing, I sort of switch off and I don't notice it. But the thing you notice is the change when somebody's trying to do something that's trying to move the art form in a different direction, or even by accident moving the art form in a different direction.
Which I do actually think Warhorse, which you sort of mentioned in slightly possibly, I actually think that is why people responded to it well. For me, the reason why that was successful and why I think that's interesting is because people what works about theatre or performance is seeing people sweat. That's what you enjoy. You want to see bodies do stuff in space that you don't do, or you don't normally do, or there's a risk. And even though, okay, fine, that's a kind of soft version of that maybe, it's nevertheless, it's like tricks. For me, theatre and performance is tricks. And that was tricks.
It's about wow moments, as they say on Broadway, is you've got to have wow moments.
And that's why musicals are so popular. people need to learn from that. That's the reason musicals are popular. Don't just dismiss people for liking musicals and thinking
I feel like people are finally able to accept that, like the sincerity and authenticity that comes when a person like opens their mouth and sings. And I think for years it's like, I think that like musical theatre has been massively appropriated by a conservative agenda.
By a commercial.
Call it commercial. Agenda.
It's industrial theatre, I think of it as industrial theatre. Like when people talk about theatre industry in Scotland, I'm like, God, where's the industry? It's like a craft movement. Whereas in the West End of London and Broadway, I sort of think, that's industrial. That's this mechanical thing that is just like...
I'm always so struck by the difference between the National Theatre of Scotland and England and just their whole practice and the kind of work they do. And I just think it speaks volumes about the two different societies and their attitude towards art and the state, basically, in a really fascinating way.
I wonder if you could look at the moment when what we consider now to be generic West End theatre and the musicals, the big shows, I wonder if you can look at the moment where that was radical and you can extract from that the shift that came that created such a move and so much industry and so much finance. And really the way I remember it, I guess, from my theatre studies degree a long time ago, was the introduction of new technologies, new mechanical technologies, new lighting technologies. And it was those things that brought this absolutely new economy to the live art, a live art that people were worried was going to disappear. Because
and it's interesting, actually, it's technology, as you say. And I sort of think, I think people who are afraid of digital technologies in theatre, I sort of think like it's being afraid of having electric lights in a theatre. That's technology. Music amplification's technology. And I just sort of think we need to embrace it and run with it.
Exactly.
And actually, I think we've run out of time. Is that true? And I think that Sara has something else to do this evening because it's the Edinburgh Festival. Anyway, thank you very much. I think that's been really interesting conversation. And thanks, audience.